Wharton was the #1 business school in the world. And so I'm like thinking to myself, okay, Simone, I went to UNT for undergrad. Like I didn't work at Google. Like I didn't have all these things. I look online and the application was $250. And I told Sarah, like, I'm not doing this because I don't have the $250 to lose, because I think it's going to be a wash and it's a waste of money. And like, I'm now on my own. I can't do it. And she was like, Simone, do not do that. You need to apply. Wow. Had she not told me that, and her knowing all the details of my home life, knowing I have a daughter, and also I ended up being out of 2,000 students at Wharton, I was one of 6 moms in the program. So Sarah knowing all those things, encouraging me, and we get in. That changes the rest of my life fully. Wow. Like never will be the same.
Hello, and thank you again for tuning into another episode of the Minor Detail Podcast. I am your host. If we have not met, I'm Kyla Ariel, and I'm so grateful that you are here today. Listen, today's guest is amazing, and I say that every time. And I also say that I say that every time because I truly mean it. I'm excited for you guys to dive into this conversation. If you are listening in, it's going to be amazing. If you're viewing, if you're watching, thank you so much for being here. But listen, today we're talking about transition. I'm going to give you that heads up because I think oftentimes changes happen in our lives and we don't know exactly where our journey might be leading us. But my prayer is, and my hope is that after walking away from today's conversation, that you just feel more confident about the organic path that you're on, right? The organic journey that you're taking, but that you leave feeling empowered, like you too can achieve whatever it is that you're feeling passionate about, whatever is on your heart. And listen, you're finding your North Star after today. I'm believing in that.
Yes, 100%.
Well, y'all hear our guest.
100%. 100%.
She's here. She's with us. So today we have Simone Kendle. It is such an honor. I feel like I have been stalking you probably the last couple years, like behind the scenes, just like what you up to, you know what I mean?
The last couple years.
Yes, exactly. And I'm really excited to talk to you today because I feel like in watching your journey, there have been so many transitions. Yep. There have been so many things that you've done and where you've landed currently as the CEO of Wove. I'm excited to talk about because, and we were just talking about this behind the scenes, but there's not many women that look like us in your industry, number one. But the journey that you've taken to get to this point is so intricately detailed that I'm just so excited to get into it.
Yes, I'm so excited to get into it. I think there'll be bits of this story that folks have not heard yet. But I think, as you mentioned, transition is a core aspect of our lives. And I've been through a lot of it and still achieved the entire time. And so hopefully we can help some of our friends out there do the same thing.
Yes, I'm ready. Well, for those of us who don't know you, give us a little backstory. I want to kind of start from the beginning to just give folks an understanding of why we want to speak about the topic of transition.
So things began as a little military brat overseas. My parents were in the Air Force, and so we spent the first 13 years of our lives moving all over the world. We were born in Germany. We lived in Guam, Turkey, Italy, back in Germany, but really changed schools every 2 years, had to create new sets of friends every 2 years. And I was just lucky enough to have a twin sister who was riding through it with me every single time. But a lot of times, especially as an adult now, I think about, why is it that when I walk into a room and I don't know anyone, I feel relatively comfortable and I figure out, who looks like they might be relatable and I try to, figure something out. And I think it is because, the first 13 years of my life were filled with transition constantly, moving to different countries and just being exposed to a lot of different things. Another element of transition that I felt early on was my parents splitting and having this, dual households from both a just physical location perspective, one living in Germany, one living in Texas, multiple times in my life where the houses were not in the same country, but also from a racial perspective. I'm biracial. My mom is Black. My dad is white. And so having those two cultures in two different households, again, you're constantly going through like, what is the norm here versus what is the norm there, while also trying to discover yourself and grow up. And so I think the baseline of my personality, how I walk around in this world, comes from a place of huge amounts of tolerance for different people, perspectives, and just experiences, and just constantly thinking, how can I make this a positive experience, regardless of what, the environment might be.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, you said a lot because you really did experience a lot of transition. I think because I can relate to moving at a very early age, not moving countries and not moving multiple times. But when I was about 15, my parents and I, we moved from Chicago here to Dallas. And so that was the first time where I felt like I was faced with a huge transition that almost rocked me to my core. Because I think another big piece of when you're talking about transition is the fact of almost whether or not it's predictable. Is it voluntary? Is it something that you were able to sort of brace yourself for? And oftentimes it's not. A lot of the times you don't have a choice. You got to do what you got to do and you got to survive. So I love that you mentioned a lot of your personality sort of being rooted in that because it does ultimately down the line, you can kind of hindsight 2020, look back and say, this has actually really helped me along more than I realized.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's allowed me to embrace change in a way that for a lot of folks, is not as easy. And I think sometimes we compare ourselves to, how someone else walked through a tough season in their life or a good one, quite frankly. And the assumption that every piece of change is good or bad is hard, and it is really rooted in how you grew up. And I think for everyone, we have to figure out, okay, if I had the version where I never really experienced change, I grew up in the same house, in the same neighborhood, my entire life, had the same friends, and now, you graduate from college and you're in a new city or you want to, explore and you're dealing with that transition and that new experience, I think you have to just really check in on yourself, give yourself grace, and know that this is a new muscle, a new skill that you're earning. For me, in my case, I moved a lot. So for me, it's how do I know how to settle down? How do I know how to just accept this version of a chapter and not expect something to change all the time? And so there's pros and cons to both versions. But I think embracing whatever because let's be real, your childhood sets the tone for a lot of stuff in your personality. You are a product of your environment no matter what. But be real about that and, get the work done as an adult to move around, again, in a positive light, regardless of what happens. But a lot of it comes from, what happened when you were 5 and working through it.
That's so good. And I didn't even think about the other side of the coin is you're waiting for the other shoe to drop sometimes because you're so used to change.
Girl, that part right there, waiting for something to drop, to change. So I never actually feel satisfied in a season because I think it's always going to change before I'm ready for it. That's a whole other part of the anxiety. Okay. It has two sides.
Man, I can only imagine. So you mentioned being biracial and you mentioned that being another area or experience where you had to navigate at a very early age. Were you born in America or were you?
No, born overseas. Born overseas. So we were born off base. So there's some technicalities with that. If you're born overseas, off base, you technically get dual citizenship. So we, until we were 18, could decide if we wanted, American citizenship and German citizenship. We decided not to because fundamentally, we were born off base because we were twins and high risk pregnancy. So it was more of a technicality. But I love I have a German birth certificate. And then I have an American birth certificate that says born abroad. It's just a very cool thing to have. But I don't get to say, when I was growing up, people would say, oh, I'm from Texas or I'm from Chicago or whatever. I didn't have none of that. I'd never had that oh, I'm from here. So I think it's cool. It's a cool experience. But again, it was always different from most people that I spoke to.
That's so real. And I would imagine that you didn't, and you can definitely confirm or deny, but did you feel the impact or the difference in who you were before moving to America, or did that sort of hit the cultural norms, right? Especially I could imagine being biracial. I feel where did you start to experience I'm different?
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I would say the first chunk was middle school because that's when you started to hear, oh, Jade's the black twin and Simone's the white twin.
What?
Based on how we acted, how we spoke. And it was really interesting because this wasn't even in the United States. This was in Germany.
Oh.
But in Germany, we went to an American school on base. And I felt like the culture of our school at the time was most people were from Georgia, Texas. It was very New York, we had a lot of Puerto Ricans. People had, even overseas, had their tribes. Yeah. And so when we were in middle school, that was when I first started hearing, that. I'd always experienced a level of it at home, but that was sort of like, you're growing up, there's a lot going on, fine. But when I felt like it was impacting me as a human, middle school for sure. Because there was this connotation like, okay, I'm not the cool one. I'm not the, and so I had to work through that, obviously. And then you have someone like a twin that you're constantly compared to. So not only am I a young person trying to, figure out what shoes to buy and whatever, I was constantly compared to someone who at that time I thought was better than me, prettier than me, cooler than me. And it just, so.
I know, I'm reacting real time, I'm sorry.
So middle school was a little tough. But from that point, we moved to Texas. And I think overall the military world, because, the military, everybody, all the kids moved around like that. So there's a level of maybe we moved a little bit more than other kids, but everybody knew a little bit of that experience. Moving to Texas at 13, that was a whirlwind. That was moving to Texas and hearing how people talked, and the fashion was different, and just the ways that girls acted was different and boys acted was different. I thank God every day that I had an identical twin sister, again, to ride it with me, because it was hard. And there was this connotation for military kids that we knew, when you move from the military world overseas to the United States, it was a make or break moment. You either got it together and sort of assimilated to the culture in the States, or you kind of were always the different kid. Almost like a private school versus public school experience, where you could tell if somebody went to public school and you can tell if they went to private school, or homeschooled versus, traditional school. So that was ours. And I think we were able to kind of rally and, be our unique selves, but because we had each other. Yes. I don't know if it would have been the same had we had only ourselves, because that first year I was like, I don't like these people. We got to say the Texas Pledge.
Same.
Geography and history don't talk about anything but the Alamo. Yeah. And where is the culture? Where is global topics? What is going on here? We're not even talking about what's happening in the Middle East right now, because we were coming from a place where we had 5 channels. We had 2 family channels, the news, and that was pretty much it. So our exposure to, global political topics, all of that stuff was just in our household. How we operated, even from going to play at the park. In Germany, we could walk around with our friends and do more stuff. When we moved to the United States, my mom was like, you can go around this block right here. You can go to that one park. You better be back by 7. Yeah. It was just a very big shift from being almost in this safety blanket of a military experience overseas to now in the States, we were dealing with the more, normalized, downsides of living, in the United States, both from a safety perspective, but also just culturally, trying to be, a young girl in a new school. It was a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, I imagine there's a lot of pressure to assimilate, right?
Sure.
Because you mentioned that make or break. That's a lot of pressure at 13. We were just talking earlier about how high school, everything is so permanent.
Oh my gosh.
And it feels like so much pressure. And as an adult with transition, at least you can sort of rest on the fact that, okay, I know that this will get better. Yep. I know that this will eventually not feel like it does in this moment, but you don't have any sense of that as you're young. You're just kind of oh man, this is depressing.
Yeah. Yeah. And 100%. And I would also have friends who had moved to the States with a similar time frame, and just they had different experiences. Yeah. So I thank God every day for one of my best friends, Kiera. So the same year that we moved from Germany, she had moved to Texas to the same
from
town,
somewhere else.
From somewhere else in Germany. So we didn't know each other in Germany, but both military families moving to Texas. We're at the same high school. We meet in biology class, and that's been my girl ever since. Yeah. She, is still around. We hang out all the time. I was with her a week ago. We went to the same college for a little bit. But, having that also helped. Having another person who had a similar childhood, similar background, kind of going through this new Texas experience. it was just very, Texas is a very specific place, like very
It is.
prideful, very like, and I was here for it. But it was definitely different than my norm for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I think what's also really interesting, because again, I'm not from Texas, so I feel all those things that you feel. I wanted to leave the moment I got
100%.
here.
I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
These
it wasn't
people.
until after college that I became an adult and got settled back in. I'm like, okay, it's not that bad.
I actually like it here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
like not that bad. But so from you guys moving here, or you moving here, obviously went to high school. I know you went to college in the area as well. How was that like transition from childhood to sort of like going out on your own as an adult into the corporate world, things of that nature? How was that experience? Because at this point you're like, okay, I'm fully embedded almost. I'm feeling like my sort of like normal self. What was that like?
I feel like growing up, going from high school to college, I went to UNT right out of Dallas, and I realized early on, like, I needed to find community. So joining a sorority pretty early on in my college career definitely helped. Jade and I went to the same college. My twin sister and I went to the same college. So that helped a little bit. But I kind of had this independent streak in me. I always knew like exactly what I wanted to do. My family always jokes about this photo from second grade where it was my school photo, and you could wear a nice outfit, whatever. I chose this. We were living in Turkey at the time, and I chose this custom tailored purple suit. I had a briefcase, and that was my picture because I knew.
We need that picture.
I know. We seriously, like, I'll get it to you. But I knew then I wanted to be a businesswoman. So I just always had this inclination, like, this is where I was going to be. So, in high school, I had a t-shirt business. In college, I started a different hair company. I later made, I guess now 2 more hair companies, but I had a hair company in college for a second. I was a Girl Scout selling Girl Scout cookies, which also like highlight, like, that is the best way to tease out if you want to be an entrepreneur or not. I love Girl Scouts. I'm going to get Kaya into it as soon as possible. Loved that. And my mom, she sold Avon, Mary Kay, Pampered Chef, like all the things.
My mom used to have Pampered Chef parties
yes,
too.
The Pampered Chef parties hit every time. They always had all the good food and they did their thing, and I was eating all my stuff. It was great. So I grew up around like my mom having side hustles, doing a lot, but also me always wanting this like entrepreneurship business thing. So that was always a constant through, high school, college. So when I got to college, found my community, I think, my sorority sisters were the ones who helped me figure out, join inroads, to then get a good job, to then do corporate stuff. And I think overall, like, not realizing it at the time, but finding people and surrounding yourself with people who will give you access to things that will help you along your journey is so important. And you have to be ready, and you have to engage in those things. So somebody could say all day, hey, come with me to this event. Like, it's going to be really cool. There's going to be such and such there. And you could say, oh, no, I don't really feel like going. And that was how I was the first, like, year of college. My sister always jokes about this because she was like, you were like in your room, you didn't want to go out, you were just studying. Now, granted, I got the best grades of anybody, okay? The first year grades were popping, but I wasn't out there networking. I wasn't ready to get access to opportunities. So second year and on, I think that was another transition I went to of like, okay, Simone, like, you're naturally shy, but you have, the ability to do a lot, and you want to do a lot. And so let's do that. So high school to college was definitely, we grow up, we learn about ourselves. And then college to corporate America was a similar vein, but now the trajectory was more about how do I become the leader I want to be and pull things together to make that happen. And so that's where Capital One comes in.
Oh, I love that you mentioned too that the purple suit story is hilarious. But I love that you mentioned early that you knew you wanted to be a businesswoman.
Yes.
So what exactly did you do at Capital One? Because for me, I'm always like, God is so detailed, right?
Yes.
Like, the intricacies are so intentional. And to know that you started in Germany and now here you are in Texas, it's just like, it obviously was fueling you and preparing you for what would happen and what's to come in your future. And then you mentioned Capital One, right? Because I think Capital One's headquarters is here.
They have a large campus. Their headquarters is in McLean, Virginia, but they have a huge campus in Plano.
A huge campus in Plano. Got it. So how did you get there? And I feel like everybody's trajectory is like, you go to school or you go to high school, you go to college, and then you get like an amazing job, amazing like 9-to-5 role in corporate. And I shouldn't say everyone's, but that's kind of like the dream.
Yeah.
That's the American dream.
Stereotype.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I got into Capital One through Inroads. So Inroads is an internship program that specifically placed underrepresented people into corporate positions. So I'm a huge fan of all of those placement programs. I'm a huge fan of accelerators for businesses similarly, right? Like I think for us, a lot of our families don't have the advice. We're not sitting at the table talking about how do you apply for college and how do you learn how to network. We don't know any of that stuff. My parents were in the military, and so like they had never experienced those things. They had never interviewed for jobs. Like there's no conversation happening at home. And so for me, those types of programs were everything. So my sorority sister was doing Inroads, and so she told me about it. I was an Inroads intern at Capital One for 2 summers. And then my senior year, what I loved about the Capital One internship with Inroads was it wasn't like you got pet projects. Like you were just literally put on a team. And so you were an equal valued piece of that team. So before I went to my senior year of college, I essentially asked my manager at the time, like, hey, my course load is light. I've got maybe a class or 2 Tuesdays and Thursdays. Can I just like stay? And they let me stay. Wow. So my senior year of college, I was at Capital One working a corporate job Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I was going to school Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I got a head start on starting to build my career. So I was at Capital One for 8 years in total, but it's a little bit of a cheat code because I was there like 2 years, really a year and a half before I even graduated from school, but doing like really high caliber work and being exposed to how people operate. I mean, at 19, 20, just hearing how decisions are making, hearing how strategy is formulated impacts you. So I was just in sponge mode. So by the time I graduated, I'd already been, at that time, I was a process manager, which essentially means you're going into the business, you're looking at how something gets done, and you're trying to make it faster, cheaper, more intelligent, and then managing the change of that. So teaching other adults how to change their behavior to actually do this process in the new way that I'm trying to get it done. So from that role, I learned a lot about politics, a lot about how do you convince someone to do something when you have no title, no authority. You got to tell people to give you stuff and they got their own priorities. So how do you make that happen? But I also learned in that internship and then in that role that if I wanted to be a leader, I want to be the one that can speak to exactly what you're doing and what you're going through. And at that time, I was like, this one college kid who somehow got this job, and I'm talking to this 35-year-old on a phone, on the phone because they're phone bankers, trying to tell them how to click around this screen in a better way. And they're looking at me like, you've never taken phone calls? You don't know what you're talking about? How can you tell me how to do this better? And I realized at that time, like, I have to get down into what really goes on day to day in order to lead people in the best way.
That's good.
So I decided at that time, okay, what do I want to do next? Process management is one of those like career fields. You could just go up and up and up. There's tons of certifications you can get and whatever. And I started that a little bit, but realized like, my goal is to not make all the processes better in life, but it did create a process orientation on how I work. So my fundamentals are based in how process management should be fundamentally done, and change management. But I decided I wanted to be a leader who could actually lead in a real way, an authentic way. And so I kind of nestled my way in and said, hey, they're starting to open up a new location in Wilmington, Delaware. It was sort of a pro bono project because it was, 3 or 4 handpicked managers who were going to go over there, get the site up and running, blah, blah, blah. But they needed someone to sort of project manage, process manage this whole thing because they couldn't devote traditional process management resources from our team to go help. So I was like, hey, I volunteer. I'll do it. I'll do it on the side of my desk. It won't impact my day to day. That ended up lending itself to really great relationships with like the SVP there and like all these other people that I otherwise wouldn't have had access to. So like, y'all, cheat code, sign up for the stuff nobody else wants to do because you will then show all your skills. You will show who you are. You will get access to people you otherwise wouldn't. So that's the BRGs, the resource groups, the volunteer who wants to go take the kids and teach them financial literacy, like do all of those things. You will get access to people you otherwise wouldn't have. And so that turned into a job. And so they offered me a job to go be a manager in the site that they were opening up. So I went from process manager to I was actually managing people at 23 years old.
Wow.
And everybody around me was 10 years my senior.
Wow. Okay, we got to pause there. Yeah, because Simone will go. She will drop gems. Okay. And then we're like catching up, trying to take notes. Because we got to go back. I think what stood out to me the most was you asking to stay, number one. Because I think, that's like a big deal, but people don't look at it as a change maker, if that makes sense. It's so funny. We had Marty McDonald on the show.
Love Marty.
I know, we talked about that. Love her. Marty, shout out to you. Yes, you're always going to get love over here. The Minor Detail loves you. And our conversation was amazing. But one thing that she said was her superpower is that she's not afraid to ask. And I feel like we really discount the power in just asking for, whether it be permission, whether it be resources, an opportunity. And you knew early on that was a superpower. And I'm just like, that's like so admirable because I feel like I was always taught that. My mom always taught me to ask. And I always just felt like it was something everybody would do. But again, you're literally in college and you have time on your hands. Most college students would probably go out a little bit more or sleep a little bit more. You know what I mean? And just take in the last years of their lives that don't have anything to do with like responsibilities. But you're like, baby you, second grade, power suit you. It's like, actually, I'm going to ask to like get a job.
Stay and work?
Can I stay and
get up early and drive to Plano from Denton and
from Denton. And if you aren't living in Texas, that's a long way, probably like 30, 40 minutes.
Yes. It's interesting though. I try to figure out why did I do that? I think, at the time, I'm just a very ambitious person. And I felt like I was asking people that I had built a relationship with. So like, don't get me wrong. Like I'm a scaredy cat. Like I'm scary all the time. But I think what I like to do to disarm myself and other people is build relationship. And so for me, by the time it was time to ask, my manager and I had such a good relationship. I had been vulnerable before. And, from a ask perspective, I did not hold back when I didn't understand something. And I still do that to this day. If I don't understand, if I don't get what's going on, I'm asking the question. You have to let go a little bit of that ego to get access to things because most of the time, I learned very early on, none of us know what we're doing.
None of us. I mean, y'all, because it's more impactful than people think. None of us know what we're doing. Me sitting here having this conversation, I do not know what I'm doing. Okay, I want y'all to make it clear. The glitz and the glam is great. But in my mind, even I'm right now, like, yeah, sure, okay, go, tell me more. But in actuality, seriously, and that hits harder with corporate. I'm just going to be 100% honest because I also full-time, have a corporate role. And I think you come in with this idea that everyone around you is smarter than you, which is not a bad thing to acknowledge because you should surround yourself around people that know more, right?
Yep. It elevates you.
But to view yourself as less than in that moment is also not true. Like you are not lacking anything special or you are not beneath in any way, right? Inferior. And I think sometimes, and it could be a cultural thing too, but we can carry that with us. And you spoke to not being afraid to ask questions. Sometimes that's where that's rooted in, right? Is not wanting to look like, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think you have to be so, especially in corporate America, like they always say, ask questions. No question's a dumb question. I think no question is not a dumb question when you're in the right environment to ask it.
That's good.
So like just be thoughtful about when are you asking this question. Very early on, especially at Capital One, it's how do I self-serve first and then ask? If I have exhausted every other option to learn, then I'll ask my manager.
That's actually a bar.
That was one of the beads that one of my first managers told me. And also, going into the room with a perspective, even if you're not sure. So saying things like, I saw this, I think this, what are your thoughts? Like have some point of view, even if it's a wrong one, like something, but exhaust all options to answer the question before asking it in a room of 6 very highly educated and like experienced professionals. But again, like once you do that, then you need to ask the question. So for me, building that relationship with my manager, then when we were in one-on-ones, I could ask those questions.
Yeah.
I could ask about, why does Dave think that? Or what does that mean when she says this? Or what's the interconnectedness between why our customer insights team can't always say the full gamut in the meeting because the bill pay guy's right there and his team is trying to build the right product, but they kind of had some struggles last month. So you don't want to put him on Front Street when we're saying the feedback. So think about talking to him first before you bring it back to the big group. But I had those conversations in a one-on-one with my manager after building a relationship that allowed me to learn how to read the tea leaves from behind the scenes.
You had a really great manager. I'll say that. I don't know who this
blessed. Okay,
woman or gentleman. Okay.
Multiple, like Capital One somehow, some way forged a path of phenomenal managers for me, which allowed me to be and see what I could do and how compassionate I could be, how thoughtful I could be, but also extremely results driven. Like not going to ignore the fact that like things still had to be done and there are difficult conversations every day. But I really had some awesome folks who helped me through, like full stop.
That's good. And I feel the need to say this as well. For those of you who are tuning in, who do not have a standard corporate 9-to-5 job, this is still applicable in any space. Like if you're an entrepreneur, and you can actually speak to this for sure, but if you're an entrepreneur or if you are, working for yourself in any capacity, mentorship is still
everything,
like a treasure. Having someone who has more experience in the thing that you are doing is just impactful. And so being able to relate, seek assistance, have someone to ask questions to, so that you're not staying in a place of not even stagnancy, but feeling alone or feeling isolated and siloed, like you don't have anyone to help assist. I feel that so strongly because again, I know not everyone is in this space, but it's transferable and it's like, it goes both ways, really.
100% it does. I think it's harder to find mentorship when you're an entrepreneur, right? Because you're sort of figuring out, well, what type of person would sort of fill up the things that I need or have the right advice for me. And I'm a firm believer as an entrepreneur now, it takes a village. I mean, I had a village in corporate America for sure, but I have to create my village as an entrepreneur myself, which is harder. Yeah. It is harder. It's not as linear of a decision. But it's super, super important. And I think one of the best piece of advice I got around mentorship is finding someone who's a step above you, a step below you, and a step beside you. Oh. Because all those people can give you insight into what you're going through right now. Maybe you can help pour into where they were before. Somebody who's 6 years your senior, 20 years your senior will help you think about how inconsequential some of the things you're struggling with are, right? And can help guide you, open up doors. There are so many people now, I'm thinking about someone who worked for me, who's put me in position for opportunity, right? Good. You just never know. So it really is, how do you build this village of mentorship and access and just info sharing? Because we all need it. I think podcasts like this do that, but small groups of folks who know deep enough about what you're going through, not just surface level, but like somebody who's going to remember the thing you told them 6 months ago, this interaction or this goal or whatever, and fundamentally help you get through it. That's what you need. So you need that village.
I love that. Okay, well, on the topic of transitions, because we are moving through.
Yes, let's
we
transition.
are moving through it, yes. Y'all caught that? Okay, I know what I'm doing a little bit. But so I do want to talk about how you went from, honestly, such a successful corporate career, it sounds like, to now transitioning out on your own, so to speak, but out of the corporate space and into more of entrepreneurship, because I know you've had a journey there. We talked about business school. How did we get to that point of being like, okay, Simone, I know that there's more, or it's time to pivot? You have this desire to not be on your own, but do your own thing, right?
Yeah, totally. So I was at Capital One, like I said, for 8 years. Right. And 5 of those years, I was running my own business at the same time. Ooh. So I was doing the 9 to 5 and then the 5 to 9. Okay. Love her. Highly recommend her. That's the best way to do it. It keeps you energized. It keeps you going. But I was able to learn intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship at the same time.
Ooh, what was the first word?
Intrapreneurship.
Okay?
So if you are working in somewhere and you're on the team, you can still have an entrepreneurial mindset. but think about how you're adding that value in that moment. Be the creative thinker, push the boundaries, add folks value, your resources, your network to growing something.
That's good.
You don't have to be a full-blown entrepreneur to be able to use that skill set. So entrepreneur for a while, but also just like, again, this idea of transition for me is embedded with the idea of being a sponge and taking in at any place that you're at value, right? Like, so how am I in this role and I'm gaining value, not just the title, but the value of this experience.
Yeah.
So Capital One allowed me to do a lot of things. I got traditional management experience. I got communication training. I was able to learn from different people. I saw digital transformations, what it looks like to take something from an analog experience, move clients through that, move employees through that to now have this very, Capital One's kind of a sexy bank at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like they sponsor SBs, like they do all these things. So I got to see branding from Capital. Like I got so much access that otherwise I wouldn't have had I not been in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
But then as my own business owner, I was able to take those learnings and then still gain other experiences. Like I didn't have ad money, so we didn't run ads, okay? We were growing the business organically and we had to. But now as a CEO and as a former CMO, a lot of both of those experiences have fueled how I think about our business, how I grow our business. Business school kind of being the bridge between corporate America and sort of side hustle to actually making entrepreneurship my full on real thing was for me specifically the absolute unlock. I don't believe that I would, without business school, I would have gone into entrepreneurship on my own. I'm a Capricorn. I seek financial stability. And then I have my daughter. Like I was very much not the one to say, okay, I'm going to quit my job and go all in on something. That was just not my personality. Thinking back to that now and realizing I'm in a startup world and somehow I'm addicted to like seed stage, which if you don't know what seed stage of a startup is, it is like the gauntlet. It is the time where you've raised a little bit of money. You kind of have all these aspirations, but you got to prove it.
Yeah.
So you have to actually drive customer reaction, actually get dollars in the bank, actually hire people, actually fire people, and then somehow move with the market to have your business match what the new KPIs are, which key performance indicators, what people say it takes to be successful. That's constantly changing. So seed stage, somehow I keep getting here, but that is the season of no stability, no data to have a great response to things. You're using your gut for a lot of stuff. You're testing a lot of things. So pre-business school, I was very measured. I was Capital One raised, okay?
Yeah.
The financial institution raised me. So going from this like very steady, good job, whatever, I needed that bridge. Like I don't think I would have done it without it. So for others, there might be a bridge similarly. Well, maybe you don't go into entrepreneurship full stop, but maybe you leave a corporate job and you go work at a smaller company.
Yeah.
And so you just see what it's like to go from working somewhere that has, 36,000 people across the company to working somewhere where there's 50 people. Because at least now you get to watch what the owner is doing. You get to watch how they maneuver smaller teams. So that would be my advice there. But overall, like, getting into entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. And I think business school gave me the confidence I needed to do it and the access. There's this role that I have now wouldn't have existed without business school.
Yeah.
And I don't think that everybody needs to go to business school, but a top business school fundamentally changes your level of access to opportunities. My resume before business school probably wouldn't have got me a job at a lot of places, but my resume after it with that brand, people at least answer the phone. So I think there's a little bit of that stability that I wouldn't have had before and I would have been too scared. But now entrepreneurship, for me, I've got an extra chip on my shoulder that allows me to say, okay, I'm going to walk into this room and I'll always be a Wharton MBA. And that confidence helps get through. But like whatever that is for you, you should have it, whether it's you've got experience, like you know how to do this thing, you're an industry expert of a particular topic. But entrepreneurship requires you to be extremely confident and strong in some sort of baseline because the rest of the world is going to chip away at everything else. So having some form of stability through that is 100%, necessary in my
So
opinion.
what led you to business school? Because it's so interesting to hear to hear how you've transitioned, because it's just honestly been like, outside looking in, it's like one achievement after another, right?
Yeah, it looks like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you look at it from like 10 feet away, the times, no. I think like what I felt in my career, it wasn't like achievement after achievement after achievement. It was new skill, new skill, new skill, new skill, new skill. Like it was just new thing to learn, new opportunity. I think now I look back and again, you see the trajectory, like, okay, that kind of makes sense. At the time, no. Like when I took the job to be a manager instead of a process manager, so a people leader instead of a process manager, people were like, why are you're going down or sideways. You're not going up the trajectory of like what it traditionally would have been to do that job. But it was because I wanted a skill. Then, I was at Capital One and I could have kept going up that ladder. But at that point, they were like, well, you could do this or you could do that. But then everybody else had these, degrees and this extra. And I got exposed to what that could be. And I said, okay, that's something new I've never experienced. Let's try. So Wharton came. I think fundamentally, though, like Wharton was born out of desperation because in my career, I was in a fork in the road in terms of, okay, what's next? I'd been climbing the ladder at Capital One. And then at home, I was at a fork in the road because I was ending an engagement with my daughter's father. And fundamentally, my world had been rocked in terms of like who I was, how I was supposed to be spending the rest of my life, how was I going to support my daughter, moving from a dual income household that he was my high school sweetheart. So I had that very stable sense of self and what I was going to be doing to everything shattering. And that's what it felt like broken glass everywhere. And so that summer, I said, okay, and again, another blessing of a manager, Sarah, and I thank God for women in leadership.
Yes.
Because if I had a man, quite frankly, I probably wouldn't have told him what was going on at home and I wouldn't have been open. But Sarah, I could tell her, I don't have a ring on anymore. And she had an engagement that had broken up years ago that she'd already told me about. So I was able to be so authentically myself and truthful about what I was going through at work. And we worked through it together. But she also pushed me to say, okay, Simone, like, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your life? She also went to business school. She went to Ross Business School, an amazing program. And she was like, Simone, you have all the aspects to be able to do this. You need to do this. And so she helped me push through. There was a point in which I only applied to 2 schools. Normally you apply to a few more. I only applied to 2 schools. I applied to UT because I wanted to be back in Texas with my family. And then I applied to Wharton because I was already in Philly. Yeah. And so it was very practical, very much about my daughter and what would make sense for her. But Wharton was the #1 business school in the world. And UT was like number 20, but great program.
Yeah, great program.
We love UT. And so I'm like thinking to myself, okay, Simone, I went to UNT for undergrad. Like I didn't work at Google. Like I didn't have all these things. I look online and there's all these like websites that'll tell you like how, you can kind of measure your qualifications up to the standard Wharton MBA or who's applying or whatever. Didn't match any of my didn't match a thing. Nope, didn't match anything. Yeah. And other than wanting to go. So I was about to apply and the application was $250. And I told Sarah, like, I'm not doing this because I don't have the $250 to lose because I think it's going to be a wash and it's a waste of money. And like, I'm now on my own. I can't do it. And she was like, Simone, do not do that. You need to apply. Wow. Had she not told me that and her knowing all the details of my home life, knowing I have a daughter. And also ended up being out of 2,000 students at Wharton, I was one of 6 moms in the program. It's like moms don't do business school in the way that I did it because it's not built to be able to do that. So Sarah knowing all those things, encouraging me, and we get in and that changes the rest of my life fully. Like never will be the same.
I mean, you just shared so much. Yeah. Number one, thank you also for just being vulnerable. Yeah. Because I think what I said leading into you sharing that, it's just that a lot of people can view achievements as, like the highlight reel, right? They view the highlight reel and they see how much you're achieving, and they see how well you're doing from the outside looking in. And I'm not saying that you were portraying this on social media or anything like that, but that's just naturally how our minds gravitate towards just like wanting good news, wanting success, wanting to always be on top. And it's really hard to come to terms with the fact that life is not perfect. It will absolutely throw you curveballs. Your journey, the way you see it in God's will not always be in alignment. And so I think you sharing that it just shines a light on the reality of how like earth-shattering things can actually be. Because if you had never said that, we probably wouldn't have known it. You know what I mean? Just from you sitting here and obviously kind of having a bird's eye view of everything, but also being able to have management and leadership and just like community in your life that can help usher you through that time, because I'm sure it's hard. I know
so
it's hard.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It is so hard. And, you know, I think number one, that's also why I love being a woman in leadership. And I always will pour into the next generation of leaders who are women and just girls, and showing us that we can do it. Because if we're not there to be a Sarah, then we can't create Simones. So we have to keep thinking about how do we bring our whole selves. Now, granted, you don't need to put your drama and your business at work, but build relationships with people that you can tell early on care about you, and you can be a manager that does that.
Because you need that. I mean, to wake up one day and your entire life is different, there's no way that you can expect to go back the same.
Absolutely.
Like your workload, your capacity changes, your mindset.
Yes, you can't focus. You're literally crying in the bathroom during lunch, and then you're supposed to come back and present. Like, no way. Like, it is so hard. And I think for me, what helped me through that was the fact that I did have a goal in mind. So, you know, had we not had a broken engagement, I would have never went to Wharton. Full stop. I would have been comfortable. I would have been like, hey, this is my life. Capital One's great to me. I would have been a Capital One lifer. And honestly, it would have been a nice life. It would have been a nice life. It would have been fine. I love the people there. However, it wouldn't have been this life. It wouldn't have been my dream life. It wouldn't have been the, you know, exponential growth-based life. And so when I was going through that breakup and trying to figure out what this single mom thing and grieving the life that now no longer existed, what got me through was having a goal. And so now my goal was get into school, girl. So like I didn't have any money, so I wasn't going out on Saturdays and Sundays. And what was I doing instead? Figuring out this GRE thing, figuring out this GMAT thing, relearning algebra because I really didn't learn in 8th grade. So trying to figure out, and you know, at that time, it was so hard and so isolating. I was living in a space that I didn't, it was just a lot. But figuring out a way to get myself out of this pit was how I got through it. So I felt like if I could give this my all, if I could make this happen, then I could create the life that I wanted for my daughter by myself. It was not dependent on anybody else. And so when we went through the application process, I just was praying a lot about it. But I had a feeling, like I just had this feeling like this is going to work out. In a way that, like, yes, I was looking at comparisons and I knew I didn't match up. And so when I put my application together, I just put it all on the paper. And I think my essays was what pushed it over the edge. And so I think, like, again, it's another like lamenting of this idea of bring your whole self to the situation. Do not hold back. You don't even understand how your life experience are actually your assets in an environment. And so for me, it was, I talked about my experience as moving around and wanting to be an entrepreneur and having businesses, but not having access to the information and the capital and the rooms and the places that I needed to be to scale a business. And so doing that, I get the call from the Wharton School that I'm in. And I remember this lady saying, you know, I just want you to know when we were reviewing your application, one of the admissions members just wrote grit in big black letters on your resume.
Hallelujah.
And
oh my gosh.
I was like, I just broke down because I was like, that's all I got. Because I didn't have barely GRE metrics. I didn't have the Ivy League undergrad. I didn't have, you know, the Facebook, Google, Uber background. I didn't have any of that. And so for that to be recognized and to be what then led me to a scholarship and led me into this an amazing experience, like broke down and just realized like, this is all God, and I got to take my hands off of stuff because it's only him. I was not qualified, but I was because he ordained it. And so every single achievement and thing, I got Taylor Swift wearing my bracelets at this point, like everything like that is because he's got his hand on it and I'm obedient. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, man.
Without that, it doesn't work. So there's a sense of relief that comes from that. There's a sense of God's got it. It'll be fine. And that's what helps me through a lot of the challenges and the things, because now I have proof, even though, Lord, you didn't need to show me anything first, but let's be real. My younger self didn't get it. And then I had to go through hard times to get it. And now I get it. But there's so much relief in that. So, for me, when I think about change and I think about transition, before it was like, okay, I'm earning this skill. How am I, leveraging this experience to move forward? And now it's, what is God telling me to do? What does God want for me in this season? Where am I supposed to go where he needs me to do something for him, to be a vessel for somebody else? And so now I'm in this space at Wove where I believe that's what's happening. I'm able to bring my whole self yet again and unlock some of the things that I loved about my role at Capital One, coaching people, motivating people, unlocking ideas, making people feel psychologically safe to do their best work. Those are moments that I haven't been able to tap into as much. And in this role, I can. And it's all because of these experiences that he's led me through. Every single job I had did not exist before I had it, or wasn't accessible to someone in my position before I had it. I mean, if we think about entrepreneurship and VC money and startup worlds, before the pandemic, I would never be able to live in Dallas and run a company that's based in Lancaster, PA. Or when I was at Parfait, an AI tech business where everyone was not co-located. We weren't in Silicon Valley. We pitched and raised over $6 million on Zoom.
Wow.
That stuff doesn't happen, but it did for us. And I was just in this position every single time. And it's because that's where he wanted me to be. Yeah. And I listened.
And because we just went all the way left, but we brought it exactly where it needed to be, rooted in the word. But I think I'm just over here, just chills. And I'm just this is so beautiful. I'm I could sit here all day. I could sit here and be in this moment all day, because what I hear is that before his hand really started moving, you were doing what you thought you needed to do. Mm-hmm. And then he brought you to a place, the Lord brought you to a place where you were doing exactly what he wanted to do. And and you weren't getting in the way. And Correct. Not even saying that you were intentionally getting in the way before, mm-hmm. but you're living a life that this is what I think I should be doing. This is what I feel I should be doing. But that moment, I just knew, when you're talking about it, I'm talking I was back there. But the moment where you put the application in for business school and you said you had a feeling I could feel that, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know where this is going, but I'm putting my last into this. Yes. And that literally catapulted everything else to come. And I'm just glory to God.
Glory to God, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, so good. Okay, well, I'm sure the people are y'all are talking about Wove. What it, if for those who aren't familiar, because listen, you should know by now. But I want to touch on Wove because I think that for me is where I'm it's just so different, right? It's different than what we see, what we experience, as in you being in that position. Mm-hmm. And we were even talking about this before. It's I don't know that I've ever seen a woman of color hold space in fine jewelry or diamonds, or you know what I mean? Right. And I just think it's so dope. So I would love for you to just share what exactly Wove is. Yeah. I love the way that you talk about being able to work with a team. And hearing you say make people feel safe enough to share their experiences and in a work environment, that gets me excited. So I would love to know more.
We need more environments like that
for sure.
So Wove is an online custom jeweler. We're primarily known for our custom engagement ring process. Mm-hmm. So we do this really cool thing where you work with a designer, you decide on your stone, your setting, you get a beautiful sketch. But then we send you a custom replica of your design before you have to buy this ring. So, buying diamonds and gold and all these things, usually we think we just walk into a store and you kind of see these options and you kind of go for it. And that's just not how you have to do engagement ring shopping. It's not how you have to do custom jewelry shopping, fine jewelry shopping. So for us, we wanted to build an experience that was built on trust. And so, yes, you're working with someone online and you're going through a website experience, but then you're on the phone with a real human, or you're on Zoom with a real human, a designer who is GIA certified and knows everything about diamonds and gold and where it's sourced and the options you have and how you can create something super beautiful and specific to your love story, your experience in life. And so now, the first stage of the business was all about, custom engagement rings and getting that out there. And now we're in this space where we're really expanding to custom jewelry, period. Nice. So that's where Taylor Swift comes in. We could talk about that if we want to. But just custom jewelry where literally any piece can be exactly made to you. Normally, custom jewelry, you think about celebrities, you think about, the pieces that they have, and it's kind of unattainable, and you think the budget is way more than what you could budget. But there's so many ways to make it attainable today. And I constantly think about how often I would buy like jewelry from Zara or jewelry from Amazon, and thinking about how much I would spend every 6 weeks on like new hoops, new bracelet, whatever. And now when I think about buying a bracelet or a ring, this will go to Kaya. You know what I mean? Like this will be passed down to my daughter. I think about those heirloom pieces that, my mom has stones that she got from Colombia when she was living overseas and wants to create a necklace for her daughters out of it. Like those are the types of things we get to create at Wove. And it's so beautiful because it's all the best parts of life. It is celebrating a love story. It's celebrating a mom. It's like I have a bracelet where I have Kaya's handwriting of her name and a heart. And it's Kaya's handwriting at 6 years old. And so when I look at that, when she's 25, it's the most beautiful thing. It's like stamping your most precious moments into a piece of metal that will never go away. So that is really the world that we live in. It's all about how do you tell a story with every single piece. And then obviously, the finest, materials and quality. And I think for me, being a CEO of a job, a CEO of a company like this is super unique. The jewelry industry, the diamond industry is really insular. And I learned a lot about what it means to tap into insular communities when I was selling hair extensions, because that's the same thing. If you don't get tapped in with the right suppliers, you don't get the best access, you get, lower quality stuff. And so for jewelry, I think it's a lot of more so family units, right? Passed down generations. We just don't know how to navigate this thing. So coming into the role, it was nice because a lot of that the founders had discovered. The founders were multi-generational jewelers, so they had that access. But I was able to bring in the e-com experiences, the marketing chops, the how do we work with influencers? How do we have strategic partnerships to grow the business? And also really think about what is the total moments that matter to represent what Wove is in the world, not just one moment. Engagement will always be our Trojan horse. That is our bread and butter. But I want to talk about push presents. I want to talk about the anniversary upgrade. I want to talk about Mother's Day. Like she deserves diamonds. And so that's kind of the world we live in now.
I love that. And you're such a marketer at heart because you're like sprinkling in little moments, you know what I mean? Other ways to pull people in. Because when you kind of get niched down into one specific area or genre, whatever you want to call it, then people only see you for that. But when people see your business as more of a 360 type of, you know what I mean? Like good, so if you will, then you're more inclined to see different types of people, and you're more inclined to speak to different types of people with different types of stories. So
absolutely.
I love that.
I think a lot of businesses think about that expansion from a price point. So they say, oh, we're here. We're a little bit too high for those people, so let's create something a little bit cheaper, less quality. Or we're here, we want to be more luxury, but we don't match the quality because we're trying to hit this price point. And so I think for us, it was about messaging around product expansion for different moments of life, not for different budget types. And like that's where you can get caught up really easily as a brand to devalue yourself one way or the other. But for us, it was what is a comparable comparable experience. So if I'm getting married today, I may not get another piece of fine jewelry until my birthday or until my daughter turns 5 and I've got a new job or whatever. So how do we think about the building blocks of this fundamental product? Yeah. And we also, to your point, the niche down aspect, like we had to be relevant at all times, because finding someone who is getting engaged and then targeting them in that moment to be able to buy from you is extremely difficult. So how do we stay relevant for the rest of, 365?
Yeah.
So thinking about birthdays and gemstones and all of these things, teaching the world about engagement rings, teaching us in a way, in a vernacular that we understand when it comes to really sophisticated gold and diamonds and all the things. So for me, it's all about making it relatable, but knowing that these things are accessible, but not devaluing our brand by coming down from a price perspective. We're talking about how do we expand product to make sure that we have something that matches folks when they're ready for it.
That's so good. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
We got 45 seconds.
Okay.
Talk user journey for someone who is getting engaged. Maybe she's in a relationship.
Yes.
She wants to design her own ring.
Yes.
Let's go engagement route, because I feel like that's so specific. What's that experience like?
Yeah, at Wove, so we start pretty early. We want you to start building out your Pinterest board, get all the screenshots you can. Our first step is send us your inspo photos, right? Like we want to know where your vibe is at. And then we start to sketch. So you get connected with a designer. We start talking about your story. We start talking about what matters to you. We start talking about stones. And then they will sketch you something that looks very similar to what you're kind of thinking. You can think about every aspect of that ring to be customizable. So I'm talking a hidden gemstone in the inside of the ring to represent maybe the place that you guys met. I'm talking about engraving. I'm talking about, we've etched in leaves from a specific place on the setting and added like different gemstones to represent where you first met, all those things. And then obviously the center stone, which is the main baby, okay? We source that from every corner of the earth to make sure you're getting the best deal, but the most precious stone possible for that. We give you that replica so you can go have that replica, live your life, make sure she doesn't snag on things or doesn't match your lifestyle. If you work out a lot, we'll talk about, what the fit is like, everything to that point. And then we deliver you an amazing, beautiful, just sparkly, you won't take your eyes off of it, you'll be left-handed for the rest of your life ring.
I love that. I'm like, can I do this?
Okay.
Can I go through this process? You know
Look,
what I mean?
at this point, I wear replica rings all the time. Look,
so that's a replica ring. Show the people.
So
Show the people. She's wearing Wove.
So cute. We love her. But this is like, I could swap hands and feel like I'm out at the beach and I don't have my $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 ring on. I have something that looks like it, but is less risky to move around with. So the replica rings are your honeymoon ring, your travel ring, the ring you wear when you're kind of maybe you're in Colombia and Cartagena having a great time, but you don't
want to take the real stuff out there.
And then you don't have to walk around like this. Okay. So I love the replica process and I love that,
it's kind of like a keepsake.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. We have people propose with replicas all the time. So I love the replica proposal because guys, you want it to be surprising. Maybe you get some inspo from her or her sisters or her mom.
You literally just, because I was going to ask that question. I'm like, so what do we do before you go in there? What do we do too? Because I'm sure that's something that as a business, y'all have to combat, right?
Yes.
The idea that the ring process is supposed to be a surprise and she's not supposed to know. So how do we get past that trope for those who don't want to seem controlling?
Yeah,
right?
Totally. So as a proposer and a wearer, so those are the two roles we talk about a lot of times. So the wearer, the memes you see on Instagram, like show him, photos that you like, have a Pinterest board ready, just have the Pinterest board ready and then have your mom, your sisters, your besties know where that is. And so they can have access to it before you need to do it. Okay. You can be discreet. But honestly, we love when proposers and wearers do the things together. So wearers have an idea of what you like and what you want, but if you're talking about being married, you better be talking about, obviously, the relationship, but talk about what you like and you don't like. Maybe do a little ring shopping in person just to kind of get the juices flowing. You don't need to buy anything right then, and I recommend you do not. But you're getting familiar with what you like and what, and those are beads for him or her, whoever you're marrying, the proposer, to go in with. We love when proposers and wearers come together to that first initial design consultation. We can talk about every detail or no details on that call, depending on where you're at. So we have a lot of proposers who are like, hey, I want the wearer to join me on the design. But once we start talking about budget, they go stage left, and then we continue the process. That happens all the time. We also have a lot of proposers who come with the Pinterest board or with the idea of what her mom said or what her best friend said, but maybe they don't know the ring size. So we're guesstimating on ring size. So that's also where replicas are super helpful, because not only can you propose with something that looks like a beautiful $10,000 ring, but then the wearer can say, I like that. I don't like that. The pair's cute, but I actually want an oval. And you've not risked anything.
I love that.
You can change a stone. You can change every little bit of your design. And then she gets to get exactly what she wants. The wearer gets exactly what they want. So there's a lot of flexibility in our process. And it also savors the surprise, if you still want a surprise. It's 2024. You don't need to be a surprise if you don't, the surprises are, if that's your vibe, cool. But like, I would get engaged again, hopefully prayerfully soon. And all I want to be a surprise is the night of.
Yes.
But I want to know what that ring is like. I want to know, now granted, another reason why I love custom is you can add hidden elements to a design that I've approved. And there's special things that you do on the inner side of the, just so many things. You can etch something into the diamond itself. Like, there's so many cool things. You can get a diamond, your grandmother's diamond, and we can create a trois moi ring, which is two stones together, and it's French for you and me. We can take your grandmother's ring and we can put a ring that's from him and just make such beautiful things that it just, you don't get walking into a store.
I love that. Well, she has really sold us. I'm going to speak for all of you. Like, I'm doing my job. This is what I'm here for.
Yes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Simone. This has been such just a great conversation. I feel like I'm literally just hanging out and we're just having, I keep forgetting the mics are here. And I'm like, oh no, you're doing a job.
Yes, we got to stay in it, of course.
Stay in it, yeah. But it's so good. Before we go, I must know, number one, where can listeners, viewers find you? Because I want to make sure that we stay in touch, that we support, and everything that you just described about Wove, I think is so beautiful. I want to make sure we can access there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Simone Kendle. You can find Wove on Instagram as well, Wove_made. Our site is wovemade.com. Anything related to Wove, it'll always be Wove Made. Tons of great content on YouTube for Wove as well. So definitely check that out. I'm here to support. I love pouring into our community. I love unfolding, the intricacies of being in business and being a mom in business and a woman of color. And so I love conversations like this. I think they're so needed. And so yes, ladies, if you have questions, DM me. I am here. I want to meet you and just pour into you, because that's the only way we get more experiences like mine.
I love it. And lastly, real last question. As this podcast is called The Minor Detail, what is one minor detail that you want listeners to walk away with today?
One minor detail. Gosh, that shouldn't be a hard question. And I should have had it prepared.
No, you got it's organic. Take your time.
Let me think. Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. Things are not on your timeline. They're on his. So just trust in what he's telling you to do or telling you not to do, and it will change. You will transition into the space that you're supposed to be in for whatever reason you're supposed to be there. So just give yourself grace for it.
And with that said, I mean,
that's it.
That's the tweet. Listen, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Like Simone said, do not forget to give yourself grace. This conversation was so deeply rooted in transition, and I do not think that is a coincidence. So if you yourself are feeling like you have hit a fork in the road, or your life has been turned upside down, or you want to get it right, you don't want to mess up, you want to make sure that the next step you take is the step in the right direction, give yourself grace. You will land exactly where you need to be. In Jesus' name, until we meet again next time. We'll see you soon. Bye. Yeah, that's so good. I know, it was. You did so good.